And so that, I mean, I've had those kinds of issues my entire life, really. And, Princeton certainly didn't help that.
How'd you get into Princeton? What happened? You know what I mean? Like, you don't really meet a lot of people that have gone to Princeton in your life, so.
Well, I should remember whether or not I was second or third in my class in high school. Had really great SAT scores. I was going to go to Brooklyn College because I have a family that, very sweet, supportive family, but could not help me think about college. Wanted me to go to college, but couldn't really help me think about it. And so I was applying to Brooklyn College, and I had a counselor, Mr. Glass, Ira Glass, who said, "What do you mean you're only applying to Brooklyn College? You should apply to here and there and there." So I applied to Princeton and Columbia and Harvard and just all of these places, and got admitted to every single one except for the State University at New Paltz. And I don't even know why. I never pursued why.
It's a little weird though, isn't it?
But then I had this thing, how do I choose a college? And so my brother, who was 6 at that point, well, I put all of the colleges in a hat. I guess I was into hats then as well. And I had my brother choose which college I went to.
That's wonderful. And then you've done really good on the test. That doesn't matter. Just did you understand the gravity of Prince? Okay, so you didn't. That's awesome.
Yeah, I understood it, and it was terrifying. And I still remember my first day there, feeling poor, having my next door neighbor's family invite me out to dinner. Franklin Carter Henry was his name, and they were from, I don't know where they were from, but I said I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and Franklin Carter Henry, who's a really nice guy, goes, "Brookline! I have an aunt from Brookline." And I'm like, "No, Brooklyn, New York."
That's great. Did you ever find out where Brookline or what?
No, it's Brookline, Massachusetts. It's really near Boston, and it's really fancy.
That is Brookline, yeah.
And I don't know. Gay stuff at Princeton was easy because it had been a male school until the year that I was admitted, and they admitted about 150 women. So. Sex was easy. That very first year, this was the year of Stonewall. And so I keep thinking it's that year when I arrived, but I've been in touch with some Princeton gay historians who say that the gay Advocates of Princeton Gap, I can't remember exactly what it was called, was actually founded in 1970, so I would have been there a year. But was founded then. That fall, I remember going out to high schools and being on panels. And Princeton is a really liberal place, and so even back then, they would have invited gay people. What is all this gay stuff? Come and be on a panel and let our kids ask, "What do you do in bed?" And other crazy shit like that.
So in 1970, you were on panels speaking out against, wow.
Just
speaking out.
Yeah, just saying, I'm here, I don't think that I'm weird, yeah.
If you have sex with me, you won't think that I'm weird. So what are, in that situation, what are some of the questions that they would ask? Because 1970 is quite different from now. There was no internet, the younger people, so it was only what their parents told them, basically. So what are some of the things that you were asked?
I don't even remember, other than what do you do in bed. I know that we talked about Stonewall. I know there had already started to be gay literature was coming out, and so I know we talked about that.
How did you feel when Stonewall happened?
I was so sad that I wasn't there. I was in, I had probably just graduated or was within a day or two of graduating from high school. And again, I don't know where this comes from, but I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And I was beginning to think, okay, no, wait a minute. This is me. These people are me. And
We, right? Now it became we gotta do.
I really almost immediately started seeking out some of the organizations. I didn't, because I was then headed off to college, I didn't really do a lot that summer with organizations. But I don't know, I just took to it. And I wasn't like out. It's like, even though I was in high schools at Princeton on panels, and I went to the GAP meetings, I can't imagine that I would have marched across campus with a sign that said, "Look at me, I'm gay." Woo! But it just kind of bubbled, and then as I read more and more, I suddenly realized, okay, I've got to do my thesis on this because I just want to read more. Not a great researcher, but I sure had fun reading and going into Manhattan to, I think it was called the Oscar Wilde bookstore, or I think that's what it was called, and getting books there and coming back. And I would, even though I was underage at that point, I had a mustache and I looked, and people didn't challenge me, and I would go to this place called Nine West, which is a gay restaurant bar in New York City, and I'd run around in New York with my gay newspaper. I can't remember the name of it anymore, on the outside. But I get back to Princeton, and I was basically any other schmo at Princeton.
That's great. So the sense of community and all of that, when did that really come into play for you? Like, when did you really go, okay, there's this community and we have to work together no matter what and all of that? When did you really feel that?
Well, I think it was at Princeton. We would start, there was this subculture of folks who went to the GAP meetings, of folks who were a part of the theater there. We would have dances. And it was mainly was men there, so there was no community that was more than gay men. But I just really loved being a part of that. It kind of was wrenching leaving Princeton, because I left Princeton and then had to go out into the world, and it wasn't the best transition. It was kind of one of the rockier times in my life. One of the few times when I think I've been the most closeted. But
Why?
because I went to work for a big corporation and just didn't feel like I could be really out. But very quickly, I graduated in 1973, and I met John in 1976. So there was about a 3-year period there, and I was still doing stuff. I always went to gay pride marches in New York and such. And then
How were they then versus now? Because I hear that it was a civil rights march. That they still had fun, but the message was always clear that it was liberation or something like that.
Yeah, it was liberation, but there were still drag queens and guys with little clothes on. Back then, just our normal wear were these tiny little shorts. So
The Marines still wear those to run in, and they do this thing called field day where they clean their barracks. So one day when I just got in there, I open up the door and I look out, and there's all Marines in booty shorts vacuuming.
Yeah.
It was the gayest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I just went back into the room because I was like, something has gone terribly right in the world.
But I used to get into my transgender friends will love me for this, big fights back in 75, 76. I remember ruining a dinner party once because some folks at this dinner party were saying, well, I think that the gay pride parade is fine and all, but I just hate the fact that there are all of these drag queens and such. And I'm like, give me a friggin' break.
Lighten up.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, and so what would you say if you were at your cousin's house and they were talking about all these goddamn gay guys that are coming out of the closet everywhere. I said, get real.
It's the same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so then I met John in 76, and we moved to Key West in 1977, very briefly. But I kind of was a groundbreaker there in that I got a civil service job. Now, that doesn't sound like much, except that all of the gay people there were like, oh my God, how did you crack that? Because the civil service jobs were reserved for Cubans from the old-time Cuban families. And suddenly, there I was. And then I brought John in, and we were the kind of gay little couple in that area. And that was it. I was never really, and I never had another job interview. When we moved to Portland, and then we moved here, in which I did not establish during the interview that I was gay. And yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, there was a time in my life. I think that the biggest one was when I graduated from Princeton, and the thought that I would be happy going to work in kind of a boring job in a corporation, and that's what I was going to do. And I had just left was getting ready to leave this world where, I don't know, there was a little danger in being gay and all, but it was a really creative world. And then I find myself in a suit, working for Sears Roebuck, and it just was not the true me, and I don't think that I had the confidence at that point to know that I could just kind of find another fun world to work in. Or I guess I hadn't really thought much about what people do for work, because my context for what people did for work was that they went into some mainly manufacturing job, or they delivered mail, and all that's fine. But man, I could have been so much more creative back then with where I went. There are so many teachable moments out there. I can think of years ago, and this is really thankfully years ago, being really stumped by the transgender issue, even though, despite what I said about standing up for drag queens, the whole idea that somehow people were trapped in the wrong body was just so new to me. And I don't think anybody could ever say that I was mean or disrespectful to someone, but I can think of one individual where I know that my questions must have been, a little odd, because in so many ways I had all of it together, but I was asking stupid questions. I'm failing on this one. I've had kind of a charmed life, I have to say.